Let me start by saying, I'm not afraid of work. Give me a tight deadline? I'll meet it. A big client with high expectations? I'll exceed them. Long hours once in a while? Sure, that's part of the game. But what I won't tolerate is being exploited under the guise of passion. I was hired at a mid-sized digital marketing agency in the heart of the city. It wasn't a giant firm, but it had a good reputation, fast-moving campaigns, big-name clients, trendy branding. On paper, it looked like a dream. In the interview, they told me the usual. We're a high-performance team. We work hard and play hard. We're all about growth, yours and ours. It was all buzzwords. I didn't know it yet, but I was about to become the poster child for how burnout gets disguised as company culture. My manager was a woman named Lydia. In her early 30s, sharp dresser, fast talker, always had a latte in one hand and AirPods in the other. At first, she seemed cool, charismatic, enthusiastic, encouraging. She called me rock star after my first client pitch and told the team I was a solid addition. I was pumped, eager to prove myself. I stayed late a couple nights in the first week to wrap up copy decks and content calendars. Lydia noticed and said, "Love that hustle energy." At the time, it felt like praise. But then the late nights became expected. It started subtly. On Wednesday evenings, she'd slack me at 5:45 p.m. "Hey, Client X needs the revised version tonight. Can you take a look?" Or, "Can you just clean this up a bit and send before you log off?" What she meant by a bit was 2 hours of revisions and a full new slide deck. By the end of my second month, I was regularly staying at the office until 9 or 10 p.m. And then it escalated. One night, I was just about to shut my laptop at 8:30 p.m. when Lydia walked by my desk and said, "You're still here? Legend! Listen, Client Y just dropped something last minute. Can you whip up a quick strategy doc? It won't take long." It took 3 hours. When I mentioned it the next morning, she just smiled and said, "That's the energy I love to see." There were no boundaries, no compensation, not even time off in return. I wasn't working late because the company was in crisis. I was working late because my manager didn't know how to say no to clients and assumed I would just pick up the slack. I once brought up how intense things had been lately, and Lydia replied with a laugh, "This is agency life. You've got to love the grind." Except, I didn't. I loved my craft. I loved building campaigns, pitching ideas, solving problems. But I didn't love having no life outside of work. I didn't love being so tired I forgot what day it was. I didn't love seeing texts from friends and realizing I hadn't replied in days. And most of all, I didn't love the creeping realization that I was being used. Still, I didn't complain. Not yet. Instead, I started keeping track. I created a private spreadsheet labeled "Extra Hours. Internal use only." Every day, I logged the time I stayed beyond 6 p.m. I didn't include breaks or wasted time. Just pure logged labor. That first full month, I worked 92 hours of unpaid overtime. That's over 2 full work weeks. No bonuses. No comp time. No great job. Email. Just Lydia saying, "Let's push harder next month." And you know what the worst part was? I thought it was normal. It's strange how fast something unhealthy can start to feel normal. You tell yourself, "It's just this week. It's a busy season. Next month will be lighter." But somehow, next month becomes next year, and your life is still ruled by 11 p.m. deadlines and 2 a.m. Slack pings from a manager who sleeps just fine while you're grinding for a client you've never even met. That's where I found myself, trapped in a cycle of late nights, fake smiles, and performative gratitude. Lydia had a way of acting like a best friend when she needed something, and then forgetting you existed the second the work was done. One minute, she'd send you a gif saying, "You're a legend raising hands," and the next, she'd throw you under the bus on a client call when a graphic didn't render properly. She was the queen of soft pressure, never overt, never yelling, just relentless expectations disguised as compliments. "Can you be a lifesaver again? You're the only one I trust with this. Let's pull together and crush it tonight. I owe you a coffee." Spoiler, there was never any coffee. The culture around her enabled it, too. The company didn't have a clear overtime policy, which Lydia exploited like it was a cheat code. There was no formal time tracking system. As long as the work got done, nobody cared when, or for how long, you were online. She played the ambiguity like a violin. On paper, I was working 9 to 6. In reality, my days ended closer to midnight. And when I tried setting boundaries, I got the usual guilt trip. One Friday afternoon, I messaged her. "Hey, just a heads up, I've hit 60 hours already this week. Is there any chance we can push the deck review to Monday?" Her response? "I totally get it, but the client's expecting it tonight. I'd do it myself, but I'm just buried." "You're a machine, though." Flexed biceps. Translation: I'm not doing it, and you don't get to stop either. That night, I stared at my screen until my eyes hurt, fixing PowerPoint animations while my roommate went out with friends. Again, the moment that finally snapped something inside me came 2 weeks later. It was a Tuesday. I had worked 13 hours straight with barely time to eat. I submitted a campaign rebrand around 10:45 p.m., cleaned up the final deliverables, and emailed the client. I CC'd Lydia, of course. The next morning, I was 5 minutes late for the daily stand-up. Not 30. Not an hour. 5. I logged on, apologized, and said I had just gotten caught up sending out a delayed file from the night before. Lydia didn't even acknowledge it. Instead, she said in front of the whole team, "We all need to make punctuality a priority. Being swamped isn't an excuse. Let's level up our time discipline, folks." I sat there stunned. No mention of the fact that I was still working at 11 p.m. No mention of the fact that she never once told me to stop. Just a smug, public reminder that I wasn't doing enough. That was the moment I realized. This wasn't going to stop. Not unless I made it stop. That night, I went back to my spreadsheet. I didn't just look at hours, I looked at patterns. Lydia had never once formally approved my overtime. She had never written anything about compensation. Yet I had email chains, Slack messages, time-stamped file submissions, and project logs. And you know what else I had? A copy of my contract. I opened it, scrolled through the boilerplate language. And there it was. All substantial overtime must be authorized in writing by a supervising manager. In the absence of such authorization, employees may submit a written request for post hoc compensation subject to labor code guidelines. I blinked. Wait, that was a clause. It had been there the whole time. No one mentioned it. HR never explained it. But it was right there, in legalese black and white. So I did what Lydia never expected. I read the fine print. Then I looked up the labor law in my state. Clear as day. Non-exempt employees must be paid 1.5x regular wages for all hours worked over 40 per week, unless under contract exemption or managerial designation. I wasn't exempt. I wasn't a manager. And I sure as hell wasn't being paid. That was the moment I stopped feeling powerless. I stopped feeling like a burned-out newbie lucky to have a job. Instead, I felt like someone holding a loaded spreadsheet and a legal right Lydia had counted on me never discovering. I didn't shout. I didn't quit that night. I didn't even message her. I just started building something far more satisfying than a social campaign. A bill. After that team meeting where Lydia called me out for being 5 minutes late, after working until nearly midnight, I didn't say a word. No confrontation. No drama. No emotional emails. Just silence. And spreadsheets. I spent the next 2 evenings combing through every calendar invite, Slack thread, timestamped email, and deliverable I completed outside of regular working hours. I wasn't just looking for hours anymore. I was building a legal timeline. I cross-referenced my overtime log with project deadlines and communications. For example, February 7th, Lydia pinged me at 8:32 p.m. to revise a deck and have it sent out before midnight. I emailed the final file to the client at 11:54 p.m. The timestamp was right there in black and white. And of course, the next morning, Lydia said, "Thanks for handling that. You're a machine, flex biceps." I copied the Slack screenshot into a folder titled, Evidence. I did this 84 more times. Yes, 84. Every late-night request, every last-minute demand, every quick favor. That took 3 hours, documented. I built a folder so airtight it could have gone to court. But I didn't want court. I wanted accountability. Once I had the data, I opened Excel again. This time, it wasn't a log. It was an invoice. Itemized. Formal. Precise. It looked like this. Date, time, work, description, hours, rate, amount. February 7th, 2025, 8:30 to 11:54 p.m. Client X deck revision and submission $3.545 x $1.5236.25. February 10th, 2025, 7:45 to 10:30 p.m. Urgent brand refresh edits $2.7545 x $1.5185.63. Total $3,480. I rounded it out to $3,480, which was very conservative considering how many unpaid weekends I left out. Then I drafted an email. Subject: Request for overtime compensation, February summary. To finance@company.com. CC, Lydia, HR. Dear team, please find attached my formal request for compensation of overtime hours worked during the month of February. Per company name, S employment contract, Section 14, and in accordance with State Labor Code 28B, I am requesting payment at 1.5x my hourly rate for hours exceeding 40 per week, which were performed at the written or verbal direction of my manager. All entries are documented with corresponding timestamps and communications. Please let me know if you require any additional materials. Thank you for your time and attention. My name. I stared at the email for a moment. Then I clicked send. Within 5 minutes, I got a read receipt from HR. Within 15, Lydia messaged me on Slack. Lydia. What is this? Me. A formal request for overtime compensation. Lydia. You didn't clear this with me. Me. Per our contract, that's not required if overtime was assigned or requested. The documentation is attached. Lydia. I can't believe you're doing this. Me. Believe it. She stopped replying. The next morning, HR requested a meeting. When I walked in, they were already reviewing my invoice. One of the HR reps, a woman named Talia, looked up at me and said, "You've been very thorough." I nodded. Talia continued, "To confirm, none of this overtime was authorized in writing, correct?" I said, "But all of it was requested or assigned by my manager, verbally or via Slack." I handed them the printed email logs, messages, screenshots. The silence in that room was powerful. Talia cleared her throat and said, "We're going to process this request. We'll also be reviewing the managerial practices involved. Boom! No denial. No gaslighting. No pushback. Just acknowledgement. They knew I had them. More importantly, they knew I knew it too. I walked out of that office without raising my voice, without writing a rant, without quitting in anger. Just quiet, legal, corporate precision. Later that day, I saw Lydia's office door was closed. It stayed that way for the rest of the week. Word travels fast. People started asking questions. And me? I just kept showing up. On time. Doing my job. And watching Lydia slowly realize she wasn't untouchable after all. The day after my HR meeting, something shifted. I wasn't sure if it was just in my head, or if the air in the office actually felt colder. People were whispering more than usual. Slack channels that were once buzzing with late-night pings suddenly went quiet after 6 p.m. Lydia's office door, once always cracked open for the illusion of transparency, stayed firmly shut. And she hadn't said a word to me. Not we'll talk about this. Not even a passive-aggressive emoji. Just silence. That was fine. I preferred it that way. 3 days later, I got an email from finance. Subject: overtime payment confirmed. Dear your name. Your overtime compensation has been reviewed and approved. The total amount of $3,480 will be added to your next paycheck. Thank you for your professionalism. I stared at the screen, almost not believing it. They paid me. No arguments. No delays. Just a clean, silent victory. But that wasn't even the most satisfying part. Because after that, the real dominoes began to fall. The following Monday, I noticed that Lydia wasn't on our morning call. She wasn't just late, she was absent. Our senior account manager, Jordan, ran the meeting instead. He was calm, respectful, and, unlike Lydia, didn't assign 3 people's worth of tasks to one person with a wink and a coffee emoji. At the end of the call, someone asked, "Is Lydia okay?" Jordan just replied, "She's on review week." Review week? Interesting. By lunchtime, whispers were louder than ever. One of the designers told me she'd been interviewed by HR that morning. Another teammate got called into a follow-up conversation about project workloads. It wasn't just about me anymore. Apparently, after my invoice, HR started digging. They found more people. Designers, junior copywriters, and 2 devs, who'd all been pulled into Lydia's late-night chaos without compensation or documentation. None of them had spoken up before. They were scared. Some were new. But my case cracked the ice. They now had proof. Patterns. Names. Dates. Screenshots. And once one voice spoke up, others followed. By Wednesday, Lydia was no longer listed as the project lead in our shared calendars. Her photo disappeared from the client team structure board. No announcement, no big meeting, just quiet deletion. That Thursday, an all-staff email went out. Subject: organizational update. Effective immediately, Lydia Simmons will be transitioning out of her role with company name. We thank her for her time and contributions and wish her success in her future endeavors. Translation: she got fired. When I read it, I felt a mix of emotions. Relief, definitely. Validation, for sure. But also a strange kind of peace. I didn't gloat. I didn't forward the email with eyes to anyone. I just kept working. Quietly. Calmly. Like I always had. But people noticed. The next day, Jordan pulled me aside. "Hey, I just wanted to say, you handled that with class. You could have blown up, and no one would have blamed you." He paused, then added, "You made this place better." And I swear, that meant more than the paycheck. Over the next 2 weeks, things started to improve in ways I hadn't expected. We got a real overtime policy in writing, with a clear request process. All late-night tasks had to be scheduled 24 hours in advance. The company started Wellness Fridays, where no one could schedule meetings after 2 p.m. All of it? Direct results of what happened. And even though my name wasn't on those memos, I knew the change had started because I said no. Because I charged them for what they took for granted. People started opening up, too. One day in the break room, a junior designer said to me, "Hey, just wanted to thank you." We were all just taking it. I didn't even know we had that clause in our contracts. Another time, an intern I barely knew said, "You showed us it's okay to stand up, even without shouting." Funny how that works. You think you're just protecting yourself, but sometimes you're lighting a path others didn't know they could walk. After Lydia's quiet exit, the office felt different. Not immediately, but in subtle ways. Slack wasn't filled with after-hours messages anymore. The word urgent stopped being slapped on everything like a sales sticker. And for the first time in months, people actually left at 6 p.m. Without guilt, without a fake excuse. Just left. And no one looked over their shoulder when they did. I kept my head down. I didn't want to be the guy walking around like a hero. Truth is, I didn't feel like one. I didn't enjoy what happened to Lydia, not really. Yes, she abused her power. Yes, she treated people like tools. But I also knew this wasn't just about her. It was about a culture that enabled her, encouraged her, rewarded her for stretching people to the breaking point as long as deadlines were met. The invoice I sent? It wasn't just a paycheck. It was a mirror. And it forced the company to look at itself. And I was finally able to breathe. I started using my evenings again. I went back to the gym. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in months. I rediscovered how good it felt to close the laptop at a reasonable hour and say, "That's enough for today." I wasn't dragging my work home anymore. Not mentally, not emotionally. And people noticed the change. One of the designers, Grace, said, "You look different lately. Lighter." I smiled. "That's what happens when you stop working past midnight." She grinned. "Yeah. You gave us all permission to stop pretending this was normal." HR reached out a few weeks later to follow up. They asked if I wanted to remain involved in ongoing policy improvements. I politely declined. I'd said what I needed to say with my timesheet. They asked if I had any further concerns. I thought for a second, then said, "Just don't make people feel guilty for having boundaries. Hard work should be respected, but so should rest. If someone stays silent, it doesn't mean they're okay. It might just mean they're afraid." Talia from HR nodded slowly, almost like she was writing it down in her head. "Noted," she said. "Really noted." I stayed with the company for a few more months after that. And honestly, they improved. They hired a new team lead. Not flashy, not ego-driven, just steady. They made project planning more realistic. They even implemented time-tracking software, not to monitor people, but to ensure no one racked up hidden hours without being fairly compensated. It wasn't perfect, but it was better. And that mattered. Eventually, I decided to move on. Not out of frustration, but growth. I got an offer from a boutique agency that valued deep work, small teams, and actual work-life balance. In the interview, I asked the creative director how they handled overtime. She looked at me and said, "If we're asking someone to give us their evening, we better be giving them a damn good reason and a bigger paycheck." I accepted on the spot. On my last day at the old agency, I packed my desk quietly. No dramatic farewell. But as I was walking out, Jordan, the senior account manager, caught me at the elevator. he said. Hey, you know you changed things here, right? You didn't just get your money. You gave us all a line to draw. That invoice? It was the first time I saw someone turn exhaustion into evidence. I shook his hand. We all deserve better. That's all I ever wanted. He smiled. You didn't yell.